Namaskar. Hello and welcome to the special broadcast on Sansad TV. I am Namrata Singh. India has almost 163-year-old legacy of budget presentations. The first budget was introduced by Scottish economist James Wilson in 1860 under the East India Company rule. Since gaining independence in 1947, India has made great strides towards economic autonomy through liberalization and visionary policy making. Over the course of more than 75 years, the country has moved beyond its colonial past to become an economic powerhouse. But where did the process originate from? When did India make its first budget? Here is an overview of the history of union budgets in India, highlighting how it all started and the milestone decisions made along the way. India's annual budget presentation is a key economic event, unveiling the fiscal roadmap for the coming year. As the finance minister speaks, expectations rise. The union budget outlines the government's financial strategy, priorities and growth goals, focusing on tax reforms, infrastructure and social welfare. It balances immediate needs with long-term sustainability, influencing markets, industries and citizens.
ये बजट आज की एस्पिरेशनल सोसाइटी, गांव, गरीब, किसान, मध्यम वर्ग सभी के सपनों को पूरा करेगा.
According to Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, the Union Budget is a financial statement of the government's estimated revenue and expenditure for the year prepared for the period from April 1st to March 31st. However, India's Union Budget has evolved significantly since independence. Today's budget is markedly different from those before the year 2000 and even from the 19th century. In 1859, shortly after India's first war of independence in 1857, the British government was still dealing with the aftermath. They were struggling with huge debts due to increased military expenses. To tackle India's financial crisis, Queen Victoria sent a Scottish businessman named James Wilson to India. His mission was to reform the country's financial system, set up a new tax structure and introduce a new paper currency. So on April 7, 1860, Wilson presented India's first ever budget. It introduced income tax, which is a major source of revenue for the government even now. In his financial statement, he announced that people with annual income below 200 rupees would be exempt from filing taxes. In order to ascertain the progress of monthly expenditure accounts, an appropriate audit based on the English model was introduced. After that, budgets became a feature of India and we continued it even after independence. After India's independence, the first budget was presented on November 26, 1947 by R.K. Shanmugam Chetty, who was the finance minister at that time. He was Diwan of Cochin State. This budget was meant for 7.5 months, following which the next budget was to be implemented from April 1st, 1948. The budget was presented in the backdrop of partition and riots to address the country's economic hardship, including food grain shortage, elevated imports and skyrocketing inflation. The expenditure under the budget was assigned 197.39 crore rupees, of which roughly 46% was allocated for defence services. For the first time, Finance Minister R.K. Shanmugam Chetty used the term interim budget. The interim budget later became an institutional process. For each year, the general elections are held. Primarily, an interim budget denotes a short-term budget which is presented just before the Lok Sabha elections are held. When R.K. Chetty resigned as India's finance minister, John Mathai took over and presented the union budgets for 1949-50 and 1950-51. His budget speech focused on inflation and economic policies. The 1949-50 budget marked the first instance of a budget covering all princely states under a united India. In the 1950-53 budgets, the government formally announced the establishment of the Planning Commission. Headed by the Prime Minister, it was tasked with directing a structured development program for the country. However, in 2015, the Planning Commission was replaced by Niti Aayog, also headed by the Prime Minister. John Mathai was succeeded by C.D. Deshmukh, who served as the first Indian governor of the Reserve Bank of India and later as Finance Minister. Deshmukh presented an interim budget for 1951-52. During the period from 1950 to 1955, India's fortunes notably improved. In the budget for 1955-56, the government proposed different tax exemption limits for married and unmarried individuals as part of a family allowances scheme initiative. From 1947 to 1955, the Union budget was exclusively published in English. However, in 1955-56, the government broke away from the British Raj-era tradition and began publishing it in Hindi as well. Former Prime Minister Morarji Desai holds the record for presenting the highest number of budgets in India's history. During his tenure as Finance Minister from 1962 to 1969, he presented a total of 10 budgets, including 5 annual budgets and 1 interim budget, during his second tenure as both Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. The budget for the financial year 1973-74 is famously known as the Black Budget due to the nation's deficit of 550 crore rupees. Finance Minister Yashwantrao Chavan presented this budget on February 28, 1973, during a severe financial crisis in India's history. Afterward, Pranab Mukherjee became Finance Minister, becoming the first Rajya Sabha member to hold the position. He presented the annual budget for the financial year 1982-85. Finance Minister V.P. Singh presented the Union budget for 1985-86. This budget marked the first step towards dismantling the Licence Raj in India. It introduced MODVAT, Modified Value Added Tax, credit to reduce the cascading effect of taxes paid by consumers. The budget also launched a crackdown on smugglers, black marketeers and tax evaders. In 1991, India underwent significant economic changes when P.V. Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh opened the country to foreign investors and eased global trade regulations. This period saw economic reforms like liberalization and privatization. Presented during a time of looming economic collapse, the budget slashed customs duties from 220% to 150% and implemented measures to boost exports. The Union budget for the year 1997-98 was termed as the Dream Budget for its comprehensive economic reform roadmap in India. It included reductions in income tax rates, the removal of surcharges on corporate taxes and lowered corporate tax rates. After the general elections in March 1998, the first NDA-led government under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee came to power. Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha presented the general budget on June 1, 1998. Yashwant Sinha's Millennium Budget in 2000 set the stage for the growth of India's information technology industry. It phased out incentives for software exporters and reduced customs duties on 21 items, including computers and computer accessories. This budget aimed to foster the expansion of the IT sector and promote technological development in India. Until 1999, India's budget was traditionally presented at 5 p.m., a practice dating back to British times when it aligned with their 11 a.m. schedule. However, Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha of the NDA government changed this tradition with the budget for the financial year 1999-2000, presenting it at 11 a.m. on February 27, 1999. Since then, the budget has been presented annually at 11 a.m. During UPA 1 and UPA 2, led by the Congress Party from 2004 to 2014, the focus was on social welfare, enhancing rural livelihoods and developing infrastructure. The Union budget of 2013-14 aimed to reduce the fiscal deficit and revive growth amidst the country's severe slowdown. In 2014-15, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley presented the Union Budget under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's newly elected government. This budget focused on investment opportunities in micro sector, accelerating infrastructure development and supporting the manufacturing and agriculture sectors. It introduced Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas and launched the Skill India program for youth development. Additionally, the budget allocated 70.6 billion rupees for smart cities, 2.29 trillion rupees for defence, and aimed to limit the fiscal deficit to 4.1%. The Union Budget presented for 2017-18 marked a significant change in tradition. Before 2017, the budget was presented annually at the end of February. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley introduced a new practice by shifting the budget presentation date from the end of February to February 1st in 2017. Since then, the tradition of presenting the budget on February 1st has continued. The railway budget was also integrated with the Union Budget from 2017.
The budget 2017-18 contains three major reforms. First, the presentation of the budget has been advanced to the 1st of February to enable the Parliament to avoid a vote on account and pass a single appropriation bill for 17-18 before the close of the current financial year. Second, the merger of the railway budget with the general budget is a historic step.
Until 2016, the railway budget and the general budget were presented separately. However, in 2017, they were merged, allowing the Finance Ministry greater flexibility in managing funds across sectors and planning for multimodal transport, including waterways, railways and highways, more effectively. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley presented the Union Budget 2018-19 and introduced the Ayushman Bharat scheme, aimed at providing health insurance to the public. The budget also included a significant formalization drive for the MSME industry with 3,794 crore rupees allocated for capital support and industry subsidies by 2022. In the interim budget 2019-20 presented by Finance Minister Piyush Goyal just before the elections, the focus was on providing immediate relief. Key schemes included the Kisan Samman Nidhi for farmers, along with full tax rebate for incomes up to 5 lakh rupees per annum.
I, Nirmala Sitharaman, do swear in the name of God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India.
In 2019, Nirmala Sitharaman made history as India's first full-time woman finance minister. Her tenure marked a new chapter, focusing on resolving tax issues by ensuring timely refunds to bank accounts and involving the public in budget preparation. Under the Modi government, the tax assessment process was modernized, enhancing transparency and accessibility. Measures like e-challan reduced fake currency and tax evasion. Connecting GST with Aadhaar and cross-verifying it with income tax filings significantly curbed these issues. Tax administration, once prone to corruption, became more efficient.
Now I come to what everyone is waiting for. Personal income tax. I have 5 major announcements to make in this regard. These primarily benefit our hard-working middle class. The first one concerns rebate. Currently, those with income up to 5 lakh do not pay any income tax in both old and new regimes. I propose to increase the rebate limit to 7 lakhs
During her tenure, the incumbent Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented union budgets that aimed at socio-economic reforms. The 2019-20 budget provided tax relief to the middle class, bolstered education, healthcare and support for MSMEs. It also made PAN and Aadhaar cards interchangeable. The 2020-21 budget introduced new optional income tax rates for earners up to 15 lakh rupees annually and outlined 100 lakh crore rupees infrastructure investment over 5 years. In response to COVID-19 pandemic, the 2021-22 budget prioritized healthcare and vaccination funding, allocating 35,000 crore rupees and imposing an agriculture infrastructure cess on petrol and diesel. For 2022-23, 10 lakh crore rupees was allocated for capital investments to spur growth, create jobs and develop infrastructure and private sectors. The 2023-24 budget focused on Amrit Kal, the next 25 years, aiming to elevate India to developed status by 2047. It emphasized 7 growth pillars and allocated 2.4 trillion rupees for Indian Railways.
इस बजट में कंटिन्यूटी का कॉन्फिडेंस है। ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा। निर्मला जी का ये बजट देश के भविष्य के निर्माण का बजट है। इस बजट में 2047 के विकसित भारत की नींव को मजबूत करने की गारंटी है।
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman also holds the record for India's longest budget speech. On February 1st, 2020, she spoke for 2 hours and 42 minutes during the Union Budget presentation for 2020-21, surpassing her own record set in July 2019.
Now, let me share with you some interesting facts related to the budget. Do you know that the word budget comes from the Middle French baguette, meaning a leather bag? Over the years, each finance minister has added their own style, from British traditions to Nirmala Sitharaman's modern approach. The shift from the iconic red budget briefcase to a paperless format is fascinating. Take a look.
Over time, the presentation of the Union Budget in India has evolved significantly, with each finance minister choosing their own style and handbag. On Budget Day, the finance minister poses with the red pouch outside the parliament. This tradition has been maintained by all finance ministers in India. The journey of budget presentation in India has been both interesting and symbolic, reflecting the country's adaptation to new technologies. While in Britain, the budget briefcase was passed from one finance minister to another, Indian ministers have opted for different bags. The tradition of using a briefcase was inherited from the British. In 1860, William E. Gladstone, the budget chief, used a red suitcase with the Queen's monogram. India's first finance minister, R.K. Shanmugam Chetty, carried a different portfolio to present the first budget in 1947. By the 1970s, finance ministers began carrying hardbound bags, changing colors over the years. In 2019, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman made history by replacing the traditional briefcase with the Bahi Khata, a traditional Indian ledger, marking a shift from the colonial tradition. She continued this practice till 2020. But due to the COVID pandemic, the budget for 2021-22 was made entirely digital. The traditional Bahi Khata was replaced by a tablet, marking a first for independent India. This change also aligned with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Digital India initiative. The use of a tablet has made the budget presentation more accessible and completely paperless, allowing it to be viewed online. The government also launched the Union Budget mobile app for easy access to budget documents. While the Bahi Khata symbolized India's cultural heritage, the tablet represents the country's digital aspirations. The Halwa ceremony is a famous ritual marking the start of the printing of the budget documents. Understandably, officials who are directly in contact with budget papers and data are locked down in the basement of the North Block. More than a week before the presentation of the Union Budget, the Finance Ministry hosts the ceremony in the basement of the Finance Ministry in central Delhi. After the ceremony, Ministry staff work in isolation for the next 9 to 10 days to maintain the secrecy of the process, and they can only be contacted by family in case of emergency. Our research revealed that regardless of who holds the position of Finance Minister, they consistently face three fundamental challenges: ensuring food security, controlling inflation, and boosting foreign exchange earnings and investment. Over the past 75 years, India's budget records reflect the nation's journey through challenges, successes, setbacks, and hopes. From modest beginnings, we now boast a foreign exchange reserve of nearly $648.7 billion and attract unprecedented foreign direct investment. India's impressive growth and stable political climate have garnered global attention and confidence.
Well, that is all I have for you in this broadcast. Thank you for watching Sansad TV.